There we go.
Oh, official.
All official. Yes. Good evening, everybody. It's Jed and Dimitri and Mimi and Mike and MK here tonight with this evening's Pro Talk, the second night of Yearbooks at the Beach 2021. And it is a real pleasure, really a delight to be welcoming one of my former students, MK Wildeman, here to share some of her insights and the path that she's been on as a professional journalist since she was in our lab at CPP way back in 2011, 2012 range. MK, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here, guys. I hope you're having a great time.
Yeah, we're glad to be able to put this together. I want to jump into the narrative almost midstream. You're in the midst of a job move, and we'll get to the old stuff later. But can you help our attendees know just a little bit about yourself and about this transition that you're in right now? Where are you tonight? But where are you headed, or what are you doing now?
Yeah, so I'm sitting in my apartment in Connecticut, West Hartford, Connecticut right now. I just moved here about 3 weeks ago. To take a job as a data journalist for a company called Hearst, which is a really big chain of newspapers that owns a bunch of publications across the country. They own about a dozen here in Connecticut. So I just took a job for them, running data, but also writing. And I'm coming from Charleston, South Carolina. I worked for the oldest newspaper in the South. It's called the Post and Courier. And I was a health reporter for them for about 4.5 years. And that was my first job out of college.
So I'm going to take a shot right off the top. I haven't seen you in years, and I'm going to offend you right out of the gate, man. Data journalism sounds boring. Sounds like you're a mega nerd. What's data journalism all about? And are you a nerd, or is it super cool, or both?
I'm a big, huge nerd. But I genuinely believe you should probably do the nerdiest thing that you like, right? Because that's probably the best way to make a career for yourself. But in seriousness, so data journalism, if you think about things like 538 you maybe have seen, or the Upshot from the New York Times, data journalists, they run data, they predict using data, think elections and sports and that kind of thing. They pull data from government websites, they make records requests, which is super important and a key skill for any journalist. So right now I'm in a graduate degree program for data science. So what I'm learning to do is use programming languages to kind of analyze big, huge sets of data that might be unreadable to the human eye. So I think it's cool personally, and I actually think that Mike does too, but he's just goading me a little bit. So
well, it strikes me coming off of being a health reporter at the PNC, plus COVID, plus graduate degree program at Mizzou, this has sat right firmly in this really cool nexus for you of interest and passion. And I mean, what's the last 20 months been like for you as a health reporter with a data kind of panache?
Well, so I was the only health reporter for the paper in a state that was hit really hard by COVID, right? So I covered COVID for all of the last, since last March, since the first cases came to the country. So that was super stressful. And I think it kind of just kicked me into high gear in some ways and put me on notice that I needed to really think about what it was that I loved about journalism. And I found that what I really loved about journalism was like sort of the exploration and the finding out of things that other people might not know and that I didn't know, and then sharing that with other people. So I think that's what kind of led me into the whole data journalism, data science path, because I just saw that as something that was really nagging me and something I wanted to do, but never had pulled the trigger on really. So yeah, I mean, it's been stressful, but honestly, as a lot of you know, the pandemic was really boring at times. So there was a lot of time for, self-development classes and that kind of thing. So yeah.
I want to follow up on something you just said about, not in so many words, curiosity. When there was something that you didn't know, there was a drive in you to know it better and to explore that. Can you talk a little bit about how that has sustained you as a working journalist, or maybe illustrate a time when that happened for you?
Well, I think it's really core to the entire reason I keep doing journalism, really. Like, I don't think that I would have stayed unless I had that strong reason why. And it was something I really wanted to talk to y'all about. tonight in particular, because writing, not to go off on a tangent here, but writing in particular, I think, to be honest, can be a kind of punishing craft. It's not a process that a lot of people I know like really revel in and enjoy. It's not like, yes, I get to sit down and start putting words on a page. It can be, like I said, a little bit punishing. And so I think I was thinking about the best writers I know and what makes them so good, and why I, keep writing, I guess. And I think it's because your drive and your reason to communicate has to be really strong. And it just has to be something that you hold really close to you and that you take with you like day by day. So if you think about why, why you really want to communicate what you're communicating, that'll push you through some of the writer's block that I know I experience like all the time. So that was a tangent, but yeah, again, I think my big reason for keeping on doing journalism is just the finding out of things that even I might not be supposed to know, like things that the public should know, but government might be trying to keep secret for some reason, or other kinds of authorities might be trying to kind of shroud from the public. That's really my strongest reason for doing what I do. So yeah, and I take that with me. I try to take that with me every day and every week and every month that I stay in journalism.
A reminder to everybody in the audience, Jed and our other moderators are watching the Q&A chat. So if you've got questions for MK, we'd love to put them to her. We had some great ones last night from Maddie, and we definitely want you in as part of this conversation. So please use the Q&A, and we'll get those teed up and get MK responding to those. You can see here on the share, I was doing a little bit of poking around at the Post and Courier site, and you were talking about every day and that passion and the drive, and writing being often a punishing craft. It looks like this schedule is a little bit punishing. These byline dates, I was going back through this and I'm picking out, let's start down here. June 8, June 9, June 10, June 11, June 11, June 13, June 14. Now, you might say, or maybe Dimitri and Mimi were like, well, she's a working reporter, an article a day. But looking at some of these and not trying to break it down just analytically, but there's some pretty serious word counts, and there's research, and there's the hustle, and there's a question in here somewhere. But talk to me about what you're responding to there on this, like this grind, or what it's like, or how you pace yourself, how you stay ahead of it. Are there days when it's overwhelming?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, like, and that's a big reason why I said what I said before, right? You just like have to have strong reasons for keeping on through it, because honestly, there are days when it's not the easiest. I will say though that, yeah, like you definitely develop an ability to just write, when you need to, and to just write it the way that it needs to be done for a newspaper, because the newspaper that Mike's showing, the one I just came from, it's a daily newspaper. It goes out every day. A lot of reporters are putting something in the paper 3 to 5 times a week. And that's a pretty normal expectation. Yeah, this was a good story, if I do say so myself, or a series of stories really about these organ errors. And it's an example too of something that I had to be kind of working on in the background while I was doing a lot of my other work, beat reporting, basically, just, we're telling the daily story of COVID, basically, was what it was for a long time. And you just have to carve out time in your day to work on your passion projects and kind of like push yourself forward that way. But yeah, no, it's definitely exhausting at times. And the job I am in right now, I don't have to write so much, which is good. So it's good to have a mix.
Dimitri, Mimi, you're muted. We'd love to get you in here. I saw you starting to talk. Please go ahead.
When I talked to MK a month or so ago, I remember you telling me about this transplant story, and that you ended up finding that it was a much bigger story than what you had originally anticipated, and that because you were willing to kind of go with what you were learning and not just stick with what your initial thought the story was going to be, that you were able to put together a pretty rich writing project for yourself. You were talking about passion projects. So I would love to hear a little more about that again, because I'm trying to remember exactly what you said. But as soon as I saw that Oh, I remember this.
Yeah, Mimi, that's exactly the story I was talking about, for sure. So the first one I wrote was back in the fall of 2020, so last year. And what it stemmed from was I gotten this tip in the mail, and it was like all misspelled, and it was just like typed on a slice of paper, printer paper. There was no signature, no return address. It was just addressed to me at the newspaper. They knew I covered health, I guess. And it just said, hospital patient got the wrong lungs and passed away. And that it's just, if you know healthcare, you know that that's something that is not supposed to happen. This person had gotten, yeah, that's right. That's exactly it. So this person had gotten, again, lungs that were of the wrong blood type. So they didn't match. And so actually a lawsuit dropped. So you can see his face there. His name's Alan. So this man passed away after he got these wrong lungs. Unfortunately, it was very sad, both for him, his family, and the transplant team, because no one wants this kind of mistake to happen. So the lawsuit dropped, and I went to cover it sort of almost like on a immediate kind of basis, right? And then I was reading it and ended up requesting a few more documents from the government about it, because they'd been in there doing a big investigation after this, none of which becomes public. There's no reason the public would find out about something like this. So I ended up waiting enough and found out that actually he wasn't the only person who got the wrong organs. It was actually at least 3 people. So a donor died, someone died, their organs were recovered, and then a bunch of those organs were mistyped with the wrong blood type and sent to people with the wrong blood type all over the South, actually. It was in South Carolina, North Carolina, and Tennessee. And Alan, the lung transplant recipient, died, and then at least 2 other people were like really gravely injured. So I ended up doing some follow-up articles, and it ended up getting picked up by a congressional investigation, like at the US Senate. So that was really interesting. And it's just an example of what you can accomplish if you just like push a little bit more. And if your curiosity is sparked, then just like trust your instincts and know that there's probably a reason for that. And just keep going. And be like a dog with a bone. That's what they often call a journalist who's good at their jobs, right?
I'm gushing over here in upstate New York with pride right now. This is just incredible. So let's flash back a little bit. We're going to put a pin in that and come back to things. I have let's talk a little bit about where you came from and how this all started. We've got, you're gonna love me for this so much.
I probably will. I haven't seen these photos in a long time.
So you were a senior in 2012, correct?
Yes.
That's a 2012, and I had forgotten this, but you're right there on the cover of the book.
Yes.
Yeah, this was the 2012 yearbook. I'm proud to say it was our first pacemaker book back in the day. And your bailiwick was that you were the DVD editor. This was the second book of ours, I think, that had video content. And you helped make this thing happen. Here's a picture of you, front, bottom left. I had slightly more hair, but that's not really saying that much. This is on Senior White Day. Here you are, just over on the side. Senior White Day is a tradition at our school, but this is the deep cut. This is, I don't think you even remember this. This is gym class heroes, the pickleball beast. I played tennis for several years, so pickleball came easy to me.
Oh my
So
God.
now that I've tried to thoroughly embarrass you just a little bit, but MK, let's talk a little bit about your start and really that transition out to college and the rest. What do you recall of your time in the lab when you were still in high school, and what kind of grabbed you about what we were doing with your book at that point in time when you were the age of our attendees tonight?
Yeah, for sure. Well, first of all, I'd forgotten that DVD was actually in 3D.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious. I actually think I remember thinking that we did a pretty great job with it, all things considered, but forgot that it was in 3D, which again is just so funny. My sisters were in yearbook. right? And so I always got like this sneak preview when I was in middle school of the sort of community that they were benefiting from with the yearbook. It's always, you know, been a really supportive environment. And I was always like sort of the creative type. And so I think, Mike, I could be wrong, but I think when I came in, you put me on the index team at first. And I think I maybe was a freshman. I might have been a sophomore. But it, you know, it was just one of the best. And I did that and I did band. And both of those things were big communities for me. And I was kind of a shy student. I still am pretty shy. And I'd never been in a place where my creativity and my need to be organized, my need to share with the world, but not necessarily like talking to you like I am now, where all of that could be sort of fulfilled at once. And yearbook like sort of immediately was that for me. And we just started spending a lot of time in the yearbook room, the yearbook lab. I have like really clear memories of that. And I think in the second and third years when we were working on the more sort of digital components of the yearbook, there would have like even more memories of working in the really small room with like the team that was dedicated to doing the videos that went with the yearbook, and just how much our creativity sort of thrived because it was like a safe space to say anything, to try anything, because this product was new. You know, we hadn't done anything really like it before. So we could really try anything. And it was just the best, most fun I was having in any class easily. It didn't really feel like class. And then when Michael be glad to hear this, but he is like almost certainly the reason I went to Indiana, because he pointed out that they have a very strong yearbook and also a really strong student newspaper. So I ended up going to Indiana University, which is Mike's alma mater, and found the same community there and found that actually every newsroom is the same. So, you know, same feelings, same sense of camaraderie, and same adrenaline rush as you try to meet the deadline. So all of that is all the same.
There's a lot of really phenomenal journalism schools and communication schools, media schools, Newhouse, Missouri, Indiana, and so many more. You know, full disclosure, I wasn't twisting your arm on IU, far from it, but not specific about Indiana. If you can parse this question the right way for me, what informed your decisions? Just briefly for the other people on the attendees who are on the cusp of making this decision, what were some of the things that you were weighing up, not Indiana specific, but just good fit for MK specific?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think when I think back to what pushed me over the line and like sort of had me go to Indiana ultimately, it was the newsrooms that were present there, just because I knew that I would find a home there, and I was right, that, you know, that was really a big draw for me. But thinking back, like, I mean, I'm a big advocate for public universities. I think, you know, at this age, not to be patronizing, a lot of you are extremely smart and know exactly what you want to be doing. But going to a big university sort of let me explore other options too. And, you know, the quality of the education was just great. And I think that I wouldn't take it back, certainly. I think that you can go anywhere and learn to write, though. All you have to do is practice. So Mike was pointing out earlier how much I write or have been writing. You don't necessarily need to write that much, but, you know, the more you can put out clips and the more you can practice your crafts, the better at it you'll be, and the smoother it'll go, and the faster your process will be. So anywhere where you can find a way to do that is a great fit for you. That's all I would probably have to say.
And to me, an earlier point, and talking about practice, it's an active process. You can't look at the soccer ball sitting there on your kitchen table and become a better soccer player, right? You can't just look at photographs and suddenly become a better photographer. So where was it immediate at Indiana? Did you go there with the intent of being that practicing journalist? But what did that experience of college give you in terms of practice, exposure? You were an investigations editor for a bit. Did that then propel you right to PNC? What was that progression like?
Yeah, so actually I never wrote for the yearbook,
Mhm.
and I didn't write my first for clip meaning article for the student newspaper until I think my sophomore year. So my first published article was about an osprey, and it was for the Star Gazette newspaper in Elmira. And that was between my freshman and my sophomore year, because I came in really wanting to do design and photography. And that's what I did for, those couple of semesters. And then, I don't exactly know what took me there. I think I just, again, had that strong feeling and drive that I needed to be finding things out and like investigating and then telling people about it. And so writing was like my tool to do that. But yeah, it was definitely a winding path. It was not like I knew exactly what I wanted to do when I came to IU.
What opportunities came from being at IU, major public university? Was it a lot of really big stuff? Did you were you? I know you weren't on the sports beat, but it's Big Ten school and things like that. Did you find yourself wanting to cover more of those intimate stories, or those stories where, again, like you said earlier, you got curious about something and you wanted to pursue it? What was that like? That development?
Yeah, yeah. In Indiana, definitely had a lot of opportunity. Well, and two, because it's in a pretty sizable town, and an undercovered one that doesn't, the southern Indiana doesn't necessarily have a lot of like news coverage going on. So there was plenty to write about that wasn't being covered. I think I tend to gravitate towards stories and topics that no one else is paying attention to. But for you as writers, I think that won't necessarily be the case. Everyone is different, and what interests you is different. You can take these same principles and apply them anywhere. But anyway, at Indiana, I think there was just a really strong writing program. And so the professors there would push us to find those stories that no one else was looking for. One in particular, for a course my junior year, I think, I found Indiana has a pretty big meth problem. So I found a meth house cleaner, and I followed him around, going into meth houses in like full hazmat gear for a couple of months, and wrote a story from that.
You found a meth house clean? I mean, what?
A crew. Yeah, like a crew whose job was specifically to clean meth houses, because that's how bad. The point was, that's how bad the meth problem is in Indiana, is they actually need dedicated professionals
Yeah, of course.
to clean up. Yeah. Gross, I know, but.
Yeah, wow. I know, Jed, I think you've got something, or maybe Dimitri wanted to get in here. We were talking in the background.
Kind of to follow up on a little bit of what you were talking about, and referring back to what a lot of our kids heard last night when we were hearing from Maddie, and she was talking about some of the challenges of being a female in her role as a journalist, and she's a photojournalist for the Boston Red Sox. So clearly a field with a lot of men involved. But she talked about developing in herself the need to be okay taking up space. And she really pushed off this idea that it was about gender, but more about, for her, being willing to take space. How do you see that fitting in within your role, on a little bit different perspective than what Maddie was coming to as a photographer, but on your role as being that probing person, that person that's asking the questions? And I know for a lot of our students, they're uncomfortable asking the questions. How can people just develop that comfort level? How did you become comfortable taking up your space?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a great point by Maddie. I have mad respect for photographers, because if you work with photographers probably like Maddie, you'll find they just disappear into the background somehow. And it's just incredible that they can get those shots and earn that trust, right? And actually writers have to do the same thing, right? So you have to be able to just kind of sit there and so there's a couple, to back up a little bit, there's a couple pieces of advice about this I would give. Like I said before, I'm actually pretty shy. So I still get nervous about these really hard interviews where I know I'm right, and I know I'm going to be asking the right questions, and I'm prepared. I do my homework, and I might write down some questions, but I'm ready to be lobbing new ones their way if they come up, right? So first of all, the more prepared you are, the more confident you'll be. It's the difference between like quaking in my boots and feeling relatively calm and prepared. And then the other thing I would say just about, Jed, your comment about being like a woman in journalism in this role, I think one of the things I struggled with, particularly early in my career, was that there wasn't an expectation that as a woman I would be assertive, right? Like, I think that a lot of subjects were expecting softball questions from me. And so actually it would have been pretty easy to skate by asking those kinds of questions. But I just had to kind of fake it till I made it, right? Like, and it's just one of those things where practice makes perfect. And now I can honestly say that when I pick up the phone to make that call that I really don't want to make, that I don't feel as much stress about it. I just know that I'm ready for it. And no matter what I say, I'm going to be coming off in my best possible way. That's all I can do to prepare. But also just, if you know your stuff, just ask the question. And you'll find that everyone, young and old, male, female, whatever, they will respect a good question. So the feedback that I get a lot of the time is, you're really well prepared, you did your homework, you're smart. I think a lot of the guys that I work with, they might get by just on being aggressive.
Right.
And just kind of like powering their way through an interview and asking those gotcha questions, which sometimes you just have to, right? For me, it's more about just coming off with like a steely, I did my homework and you're not going to get anything by me.
And
So
I think that just came up in the Q&A. We can't attribute it, but one of our participants said, how do you know how far to go in interviewing and writing about controversial topics, or I might say with a subject, you know, if it's a tough topic or you're expecting maybe your presence isn't welcome, such as politics, or this person thinking maybe from a student perspective said, you know, school related controversies. You know, at CPP, we enjoy a lot of support from admin, but you're doing a story about, you know, a story about the gay kids or Black Lives Matter or whatever else, and a principal could say, oh, we're not going to print that in the yearbook. So I want to keep it in the professional field, but I think that's some of the framing from our yearbookers here. How do you gauge those limits? When have you backed off? When have you stood your ground?
that's a really smart question. And it depends on the situation. Because like, for instance, so as a health reporter, I interviewed a lot of people with some pretty like delicate health issues. And so a lot of the time I would just think about how much I really needed to know and how much I would really use in print. Because there's a point, as a lot of you I'm sure can imagine, where the question gets more personal than it needs, and prying, you know, and you just have to learn to balance, like, when the personal crosses over into the like too personal. But when it comes to authority, I mean, it's hard, guys, because I think that as a journalist, you're kind of taught, like, push it as far as it'll go, you know? And again, I would just turn back to what I said about people respecting a good question. The more you ask, people can never fault you for asking, you know, unless you do it, you know, by knocking on their door at 11 p.m. on a Friday. If you do it in a professional way, if you present yourself well, then you're bulletproof, you know? So my advice would be, if there's questions that you feel like you haven't gotten answered, to just keep pushing for them. And, you know, in the context of your book, I guess there might be some roadblocks to that sometimes, but that's my experience and what I've had to learn to try to do.
Dimitri or Mimi, did you want to get back in here with something for MK?
I have a few questions. When you're working on a lot of different projects together, and you're working on something like you know, the pandemic and COVID-19, how do you take that large story and then find those little stories that need to be told that not everybody else is telling in the context of that, while still reporting on the stuff that needs to be reported, all the fun data and everything? And then when do you know, also ask, when do you know to let go of a story and move on?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the answer to your first question is just being organized. And it's not something that like anyone bothered to tell me about in journalism school, like that you just have to plan your time. And well, because a lot of journalists are total procrastinators, right? So we tend to wait until the last possible moment to hand in your stuff. By the way, make all your deadlines and all that. Otherwise, Mimi will be upset with me. But a lot of journalists are procrastinators. So I just had to learn to balance that like tendency to wait till the last minute with knowing that I needed to get some stuff done on my passion projects in order to like feel good about my job day to day. So I would literally on Post-it notes just write out like 9 to 12, I'm doing this, like, and just stop whatever I was doing and do the next thing. So yeah, just be as organized as you can be and just take, do something on that passion project every day, even if it's a small thing, even if it's just like making one call, sending one email, whatever. You'll find that you're making more progress than you think you are by the end of like a week. So that's just how how every journalist who's balancing gets it done. And then in terms of like just when to drop a story, I mean, I learned the hard way, like, I've had editors kill a story because it just wasn't newsworthy. And that is not a good feeling, right? Because you've spent a lot of time, invested a lot of like source energy, like you've talked to people and made them feel that a story was going to come out and it doesn't. That's a bad feeling. So you have to develop a sense for like, just ask yourself constantly, why would someone read this? And if you can't answer that question, stop. Stop, reevaluate, or drop it. Like, if you wouldn't read it, if you wouldn't think about like scrolling through your push notifications or whatever on your phone, if you wouldn't click on it, don't write it.
So on that point, because I know that a lot of kids who are in your book sometimes write stories that perhaps no one really wants to read, but they think that they're supposed to write. So if you could go back to your high school self, what would you tell her, knowing what you know now?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about this for sure. So, because I remember this being something that came up a lot with your book. And again, I never actually wrote for your book, so I was never quite in your shoes, but it would come up a lot with the student newspaper too. So I wanted to pull up like an example. And actually, I didn't write the story, but it's a pretty great example because this was a colleague of mine at the student newspaper, and because of the story, it went viral because it was so good, and she got a job as a features reporter at the Washington Post, and that's still what she does. Like, no joke, the story is pretty much the reason. So it was actually about a Waffle House closing.
Look at that first. Can you just put that up on screen for a second so the students can read it? Can you scroll up just a little bit or down? Sorry, down.
Down. Yeah. So I wanted to show you this. I think the title of the story was technically like the Waffle House, and this is just her personal website that I'm pulling it from. But
that first,
you can, yeah.
It's incredible. Just the first sentence.
Mm-hmm. It really grabs you. And what, as you read this, I really just wanted you guys to read the lead, which I'm pretty sure ends here. Yeah, it does.
Oh,
that there's so many details in this, and it was a topic that you may have passed by. It's just a Waffle House. Lots of towns have a Waffle House. But this guy, Bud, this Waffle House was his everything for like decades. And, it was everything to his, visitors. And so actually it's a really sad story. But, I can't think of a specific example because I don't go to your school, right? But think of the things that are changing this year, the things that might not be there anymore, or something that you're losing, something that you're gaining as a student body that sort of mark a moment more than anything else. It doesn't have to seem important. It can just be something that meant something to someone, which I think is what Jessica did here. And I just love these little details that she got. So I don't know how far down you guys have been while I've been prattling on, but here, this sentence in particular, they would close precisely at 3 p.m. Bud checked his watch, ignoring the broken wall clock, its hands frozen for more years than he could remember, stuck in time. It suited the place.
So good.
It's so good.
And I know because I keep track of the IDS, your newspaper, that you've buried another lead. You were the editor-in-chief your senior year for one of the semesters. Which, when that news broke, I lost my damn mind. I was never a student journalist at IU. This one was all you, and I was just so dang proud. This is still a hot topic in Bloomington. It's in there. It's about the student housing, and so I'm struck, Mary Catherine, excuse me, by more apartments, growth, great. This is wonderful. But then there's this story that the students right now don't fully appreciate. They could be living in the apartment that is on the property where the Waffle House was. And
Yeah.
you said it a moment ago, like this aspect of that story completely overlooked, completely lost to time. But Jessica captured it. And that's so important and so vital. So I have a question for you, which the year after you graduated, in the book, and I tell this story sometimes when I'm at workshops, the coverage about the majorettes, the baton twirlers of the marching band, said it was a copy block that was almost going out to print, a short little, mod, secondary, said almost verbatim, the majorettes are a team that meets on Tuesdays and Thursdays, period. They rehearse from 3:30 till 5:30, period. The majorettes are advised and instructed by Mrs. Judy Gridley, period. And then some terrible, terrible quote. And when I saw that come up in proof, I lost my damn mind. And I'm not a yeller and screamer, but I shouted in the lab. I was like, there is no way you're going to let yourselves publish this. And I do, I advise, and the students, and we talked and talked and talked. What ended up running was something more akin to, quote, the very first time that I twirled fire, I nearly burned off my eyebrows. And you know that our majorettes twirl fire, Mary Catherine. You were part of the marching band there, but we got critiqued around that time when we sent out the yearbook. They said, stop telling stories about facts and what happened, and talk more about the why and the how and the impact. And that critique, it was from a friend, Anthony Whitten, has really stayed with me as I've worked now in the last 10 years or so with Tesserae. So my question, and the timing with Contreras' article here is perfect, in what ways have you tried to embrace telling the why and how, and also using that as a lens or an entry point onto bigger stories? If you hear about 16,000 people dying of COVID, that's a statistic. But if you hear about Albert Miller dying of COVID and you tell the story of his wife holding his hand as he slipped away, that's entirely different.
Yeah, it's a great point, Mike. I think, again, I would just go back to keep your eye out for the things that are changing in town, in your high school, in the world, and then try to find ways to tell the story that exemplifies that, right? Because your job as a journalist is to do exactly that, right? Tell the news, focus on what the news is and what is actually newsworthy, and then try to find a human being. So actually, I think I have a pretty good example of this. This was part of a series. You'll see, actually, I'm on this story. I wrote what I'm about to show you, but I did it with another reporter. You'll often collaborate when you're a professional journalist. But we actually, not to toot our own horns, but we were the finalists for the Pulitzer Prize for this series of articles. And it was about climate change and how waters are literally rising in Charleston, which, if y'all don't know, Charleston is situated on the coast in South Carolina. And it's a historic city that is constantly plagued by hurricanes, but also just rain all the time. So as you can see here from this photo, this is a great example of photojournalism too, because this man is going to a doctor's appointment at the hospital. And this story was about how our hospitals in Charleston were all packed into this extremely flood prone area, right? And so what we did actually was we wrote this story in advance because we knew how much it was going to flood, because floods would happen all the time. And then on the day that it flooded, we went out and got some color, some detail. And this is also an example of kind of keeping it compact and short. You don't have to prattle on and on. You can just toss out a few details, write down everything you see, everything people say. And then, just craft that into a short story to really encapsulate what you're trying to communicate to your audience anyway. So I'm sure you guys can read this. I won't read it out loud to you.
Go ahead. We got time. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll go quickly here. So the pool of water didn't look too deep, so Stephen and Christy Parker drove through, heading to a medical appointment they couldn't miss. But then water started to rush in. Passing cars sent a wave into the Parkers' vehicle as heavy rains raked downtown Charleston Friday. In the passenger seat, Christy Parker felt the grip of a panic attack. So just steps away from the hospital, the couple called 911. They waded out into the knee-high water, which smelled of sewage. Then they watched from a sidewalk near Storm Eye Institute as their silver Hyundai filled up. This spot on the Medical University of South Carolina campus is known to flood, as it did Friday when a pounding afternoon rainstorm snarled traffic and drowned vehicles like the Parkers. So the description lasted 2 paragraphs, and then we very quickly got to what was the news. So I think that's what I'm trying to communicate. Find stories, communicate, change, and just what's important, and what's going on in the moment.
And find the human there too. Find the person. That's the and that was the difference maker. Proud yearbook advisor, trying to compare some silly story about majorettes to a Pulitzer Prize finalist. I'm blown away, kiddo. But that was the difference maker. And they found a singular girl who had gotten the singe as the baton went by her face. And that's what made it real. That's what made it personal.
That's an excellent example. Yeah, that's exactly what you need to be doing.
Yours is a little bit better, but you know.
No, there's no better.
For the last couple of days, cover people who do things as opposed to things that happen to have people in them, so that the story needs to be about the people, and it can be the how and the why, but the people, because what we want is a story about other people. That's what we're interested in. That's why magazines like People Magazine are successful, because it as crazy as it is, it still tells stories about people. That's what we want to know about.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, I want to be sensitive to time. You and I know we could do this for the next hour, and we're gonna wrap it up here in probably a little under 5 minutes. We're going to about 45. I told you wrong when we were talking on the phone. I want to pivot the conversation quite a bit, but towards kind of a wrappy up mentality. There's a lot of students on the call whose schools and communities see diminishing importance in purchasing a high school yearbook, much though the four of us panelists are saying yearbook is journalism, get out and tell the story of the year, because as you well know, we've got increasing numbers of news deserts and underserved communities, and the student journalists are journalists. They're telling the story of their year and telling stories that truly otherwise wouldn't get told by a local daily. No shots on PNC or you, but you're dealing with COVID, this and that, and not this, kid and getting his first job, whatever. Take that thought with the rise of all the hits you and your colleagues are taking on the chin about fake news and the lamestream media and all the talking points and the rest. Again, there's a question in here somewhere, but where does that leave you as a working journalist, still respectfully, generally at the beginning of your career, which I hope is going to be a long and storied one? Do you wake up in the morning sometime and actually have to turn off the news because it's some soundbite about you being terrible at your job and your work not mattering? Or does that make you dig down even deeper and want to push and to prove the point? Or how do you weigh all of that up, and how do you carry that with you throughout your working days and your life?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could say I had like the mental fortitude to be like, their opinion doesn't matter, like I'll just keep pushing through. Like, no, it's hard and it sucks. And I think, just to be frank, like I graduate the print side of my graduating class in college, I'm one of 2 people who are still actually in journalism. So the people are leaving the fields really fast, and I'm trying to adjust and to find ways, like the data journalism. A big part of the reason why I took that path was because it's so bulletproof. It's so unassailable, because you simply can't argue with data, right? So that's a big reason why I think I was drawn to that. But I think what I would tell you guys in the context of your book is, like, even if it's getting harder and harder to sell these books, latch on to the positive feedback you're getting, because you'll always get it, right? There's always going to be someone for whom the yearbook really matters. And I found that with newspapers, you know, you get the occasional note from a reader who the story opened their eyes, or the story changed their viewpoint, or the story gave them information that they never would have had otherwise. So you really have to focus on the positive good that you're doing. And it is something that's really important for you and your community. I know it's like extremely nerdy, but you know, these yearbooks are going to go in the library and someone's going to pick it up decades from now. And through that lens, they'll understand a little bit about what your life was like and what your peers' life was like in this moment. And like, there's simply no more interesting moment than this one, both because of the pandemic and the news that's going on right now. Politically, you know, there's so much that's going on that makes this time really interesting. So you have this really unique opportunity to try to capture that in your personal and student body context, you know. So just like try to embrace it and try to just really hold on to that and shut out any criticism about the worth of this kind of publication, because it does mean a ton.
I'm an emotional person. I'm not over here. I need you to know, and I actually, I feel like I can speak for Dimitri and Jed and Mimi, because you, as one of mine, are one of ours in the yearbook tribe. Maddie was, Priscilla tomorrow night was, and is still. Thank you for all that you're doing and for just being awesome. Nice flex on, you know, Pulitzer Prize finalist. It's what I do. Just so grateful for you coming in and sharing your story. Mimi, I don't know if you would wanted to say anything here on wrap up as we say goodbye to Mary Catherine tonight.
Well, second conversation, just as interesting and fun as our first conversation a month ago. And it's just such an honor to know that you guys and all the work that you did in high school resulted in a change in your path, you know, in life. And it allowed you to do things really well because of things that you learned in yearbook. And of course, that's near and dear to our hearts, because we want every kid in yearbook to have a life-changing experience. And sometimes life-changing isn't a bolt of lightning out of the sky that, you know, gets you in your butt and makes you fly up in the air. It's a series of little things building up to understanding things in a different way and knowing your life is going to be different because of it. And I really feel that I got that sense from you. And you are, you're just really an impressive young woman. I mean, just really an impressive young woman. And we are really blessed to have you with us.
Yeah. Yeah. So on behalf
Thanks.
of everybody listening, and Dimitri and Jed, Mimi, and myself, MK, thank you so much for spending time with us tonight.
I'm really grateful for your book, and I know you guys will be too. So I hope you keep having so much fun with it and meet your deadlines.
There it is. MK, we'll hang it up now. I'll be in touch via email. Thanks so much, buddy.
Thanks.
Cheers.
I enjoyed it. Thanks, guys. Bye.